Rafe kicked at the rusted panel, more out of spite than any real hope of it budging. The derelict wormhole station, lovingly referred to as Rust Bucket Central by its unfortunate inhabitants, had seen better days decades ago. Maybe centuries, maybe never. "Really, Rafe," grumbled Jax, all lean muscle and bad attitude. "If you hurt that thing's feelings anymore, it might just fall apart." Rafe smirked, running a hand through hair that hadn't seen clean water since they'd arrived. "What, and rob you of your charming decor? Never." Jax glanced around the dim corridor, fluorescent lights flickering like they couldn't quite decide if they wanted to be on or off. "Yeah, real shame to lose this paradise." "Speaking of paradise," Rafe said, yanking at a loose wire, "we've got a problem." Jax raised an eyebrow. "Just one?" "Don't get greedy," Rafe shot back, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Turns out our gracious hosts have plans for us." "Plans? What kind of plans?" Jax's eyes narrowed, suspicion thick in his voice. "The kind where we get quarantined." "Like zoo exhibits," Rafe grimaced, tossing the wire aside. "How's that for hospitality?" Jax snorted. "Typical. You finally get a place with a view and they want to put us behind bars." The station groaned, metal straining against neglect and the universe's apathy. If it had a soul, it was undoubtedly as jaded as its temporary residents. "Where'd you hear that?" Jax asked, leaning against the wall like he owned it. "Found the plans in a terminal. Not too hard when you've got the code," Rafe replied, tapping his temple where only a fool would assume his mind was only skin deep. "You and your clever fingers," Jax muttered. "It pays to have hobbies," Rafe said with a grin that had seen more trouble than triumphs. "So, want to help me stop these bastards from caging us in like last season's reality show?" Jax shrugged. "I've got nothing else on my calendar, unless you count watching paint dry." "Great team spirit," Rafe said, clapping a hand on Jax's shoulder. "Let's see if we can give them a show they won't forget." As they moved through the bowels of Rust Bucket Central, the station's AI, a relic of better times, cheerfully reminded them in a tinny voice that oxygen levels were acceptable, at least for another few days. After that, well, breathing was overrated anyway. "How'd you know they'd be up to something like this?" Jax asked, his boots thudding against the metal floor. Rafe shrugged. "Call it a gut feeling, or maybe it's just that every time I get comfortable the universe likes to kick me in the teeth." Jax chuckled. "You should thank it, keeps you on your toes." "Yeah, gratitude's my middle name," Rafe said, his voice laced with sardonic amusement. They reached a junction where the station split into corridors that led to various compartments, home to those too stubborn or too stupid to leave when the station went to hell. Rafe motioned for Jax to follow him down the one leading to the control center. "What's the plan, fearless leader?" Jax asked, sarcasm hanging in the stale air. "Simple," Rafe replied, smirking. "We hack the system, crash their little party. And if that doesn't work, we improvise," Rafe said, which is really just a fancy word for run like hell. The control center was a mess of tangled wires and screens that looked like they'd been salvaged from a scrapyard. Rafe approached the main terminal with the reverence one might afford an unexploded bomb. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, fingers dancing over the keyboard. Jax stood by, eyes scanning the room. "You know, if you spent half as much time on a real job as you do on this." "I'd be miserable," Rafe finished for him, glancing up with a wry grin. "And who wants that?" "Fair point," Jax conceded. The terminal beeped in protest, but Rafe wasn't one to take no for an answer. He coaxed, threatened, and eventually sweet-talked his way past the system's defenses. "Got it," he said triumphantly. "We're in." Jax peered over his shoulder. "What are we looking at?" Rafe pointed at the screen. "Blueprints, quarantine zones, places they want to stick us where we can look pretty for their viewing pleasure." Jax frowned, eyes narrowing. "Any idea who they are?" "Bureaucratic types." "You know, the kind who think humans need babysitters," Rafe said, shaking his head. "And they call us the primitive ones." "Man, I hope they got good popcorn," Jax quipped. Rafe typed furiously. "Let's see if we can scramble their plans a bit, shall we?" The station shuddered, a low groan echoing through its skeleton. Rafe paused, fingers hovering over the keys. "You feel that?" Jax nodded. "Like it's about to fall apart. "You sure this is safe?" Rafe laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Safe. On this station, you're a riot." With a final keystroke, Rafe locked the terminal and turned to Jax. "All right, let's blow this joint before they decide to show up and spoil our fun." Jax grinned. "You mean before they catch you and start charging admission?" "Exactly," Rafe said, motioning for Jax to head back the way they came. They navigated the corridors, the occasional hiss of steam and distant clanging adding a symphony of chaos to their retreat. "You think anyone else knows?" Jax asked, keeping pace with Rafe. "Doubt it," Rafe replied, dodging a low-hanging pipe. "Most folks around here are too busy trying to survive to notice the bars closing in." Jax nodded, his expression grim. "Then we better make sure they get the memo." Rafe's footsteps faltered and he turned to face Jax, eyes serious beneath his usual bravado. "Yeah, they deserve to know. Even if we can't stop it, they should have a choice." Jax clapped him on the back. "Look at you getting all noble." "Don't get used to it," Rafe muttered, resuming their pace. "But hey, if we're going down, might as well go down swinging." As they neared the main habitation deck, Rafe paused, glancing back at the way they'd come. "You ever wonder why we're always the ones in the deep end?" Jax chuckled. "Maybe because we're too stubborn to drown." Rafe shrugged. "Guess there's worse ways to live." They stepped into the deck, the hustle and bustle of life aboard the dying station creating a cacophony of voices and movement. The people here, refugees, outcasts, those too broke or broken to make it elsewhere, moved like shadows, each lost in their own struggle. "Think anyone will listen even if we do tell him?" Jax asked, surveying the crowd. Rafe sighed. "They'll listen. Whether they care is another story." Jax nodded. "Well, let's give him something to think about." Rafe grinned despite the gnawing unease in his gut. "Let's." They moved through the throng, Rafe's voice rising above the din. "All right, listen up," he shouted, drawing eyes like a magnet. A few stopped, curiosity piqued. Most ignored him, too engrossed in whatever kept them from despair. "Seriously, you're going to want to hear this," Rafe continued, undeterred. "Our benevolent landlords have big plans for us, and spoiler alert, it involves cages." The crowd's murmuring grew, skepticism mingling with interest. "Cages, huh?" someone called out, derision thick in their tone. "And how do you know this, Rafe?" "Because I've seen it," Rafe replied, meeting the challenge head-on. "Blueprints, designs, all neatly tucked away in the station systems. They've got us pegged for a permanent stay." The murmurs turned to whispers, a tide of unease washing through the masses. "And what do you propose we do about it?" Another voice demanded, practical and harsh. Rafe spread his arms, a cocky grin plastered on his face. "Raise some hell, of course." Jax snorted. "Hell's his specialty." Someone in the crowd laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Sounds risky." "Riskier than doing nothing," Rafe countered, eyes hard and challenging. The crowd fell into a tense silence, weighing the slim hope Rafe offered against the bleakness of their reality. "All right, Rafe." A grizzled old man finally spoke, his voice carrying the authority of hard-earned respect. "You got our attention." "What next?" Rafe grinned, his heart pounding with something that might have been fear or excitement, or maybe both. "Next, we crash the system and give them a taste of their own chaos." Jax clapped him on the shoulder. "You always did know how to throw a party." "What can I say?" Rafe replied, turning back to the crowd. "Let's make our hosts regret ever inviting us." The crowd, once fragmented by apathy and despair, began to hum with a dangerous kind of energy, the kind that sparked revolutions and toppled empires. "Count me in," someone shouted, a ragged cheer echoing the sentiment. Rafe nodded, his grin widening. "All right then, let's give him hell." With a final glance at Jax, Rafe knew this was only the beginning. Their backs were to the wall, but at least they weren't alone. For the first time in a long time, they were united in purpose and ready to defy the universe one more time. The station shuddered again, as if sensing the shift in its bones. Rafe felt a thrill run through him, part fear, part exhilaration, as they prepared to face whatever came next. And for the first time in years, maybe ever, he felt alive. Rafe stood in the dimly lit room, the flickering screens casting a ghostly glow. The control center of Rustbucket Central was the closest thing to a nerve center the station had, like the brain of a three-legged dog. Not pretty, but it did the job. Or so they hoped. Beside him, Jax leaned against a wall, arms crossed, the picture of a man thoroughly unimpressed with life. "So what's the plan, genius?" he asked, a lopsided grin on his face. "Plan," Rafe repeated, mock offense dripping from his words. "You wound me, Jax. I always have a plan." "Yeah, and most of the time it's run in circles till something blows up," Jax shot back. Rafe gave him a cheeky wink. "If it ain't broke, don't fix it." Myron, the tech-savvy, unassuming third wheel to their dysfunctional tricycle, entered, her steps almost silent. Her entrance was as subtle as her skill set was formidable. She was the kind of person who could hack into a secure system with a potato if it came to it. "Finally, the cavalry's here," Rafe said, motioning to her. "Myron, meet sarcasm incarnate, Jax." "Jax, meet our best chance at not becoming interstellar lawn ornaments." She nodded, a ghost of a smile on her lips. "So, I hear we're about to go head-to-head with some galactic peeping toms." Rafe grinned. "That's the spirit. We've got some snooping to do ourselves. Apparently, those bastards are watching us closer than a stalker at a telescope convention." "Great," Jax muttered. "Love knowing my privacy's as holy as a sieve." Rafe waved them over to the main terminal. "All right, here's the scoop. Our hosts have been kind enough to set up surveillance everywhere. If there's a corner we can scratch our asses in, they've got eyes on it." Myron slid into the chair before the terminal, fingers laying claim to the keys like a musician about to play a symphony of destruction. "Let's see how much I can uncover before they realize they're being undressed." "Be gentle," Jax drawled. "Don't want to piss them off too soon." Rafe snorted. "Too soon for them or too soon for us?" Myron chuckled softly as she worked, screens rolling with data. "You know, if you guys spent half as much time being serious as you do joking, we might actually get somewhere." "Where's the fun in that?" Jax replied, glancing at the static-laden video feeds now rolling past on the screen. "Got something," Myron said, her tone shifting from casual to focused. "Looks like they've got more than just cameras. They've got sensors for heat, motion, maybe even heartbeats." "Well, that's just peachy," Rafe muttered. "What are we, a science experiment? More like exhibits in an alien zoo," Jax said, his voice half amused, half annoyed. "Hope they at least have a decent gift shop." Myron's fingers danced, digging deeper. "Looks like they've got a dedicated server for the surveillance. I can probably bounce the signals, confuse them, maybe even send them on a wild goose chase." Rafe rubbed his hands together. "See, this is why we keep you around, Myron. You're the only one who can make a server cry." She smirked. "Flattery will get you everywhere." "Everywhere except out of this mess," Jax pointed out, his gaze still fixed on the screen. "True, but it's a start," Rafe said, clapping Myron on the shoulder. "We screw with the surveillance, buy ourselves some time to figure out who these voyeurs are and what they want. Besides our charming company, of course," Jax added dryly. Myron tapped a few more keys, her brow furrowed. "Okay, I'm setting up a few loops and false feeds. It should look like we're still in our quarters or wherever we decide we aren't." "Good," Rafe said, satisfied. "That gives us room to move." Jax straightened, a shadow of concern crossing his face. "What if they catch on? I mean, they're watching us for a reason, right?" "Then we improvise," Rafe answered, the words slipping from his tongue with the ease of repetition. "I'm convinced that's our strongest skill." "More like our only skill," Jax quipped. "Better to be a jack of one trade than a master of none," Rafe shot back, turning to Myron. "Think you can dig up more on our guests? Any names, faces, or favorite colors?" "I'll see what I can find," Myron replied, her eyes flicking over the screens. "But it might take a while." "They're thorough, whoever they are." Rafe nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Then we keep distracting them. Give them something to watch while we get our ducks in a row." "Ducks? On this station?" Jax asked, incredulous. "More like rats." "Rats it is," Rafe conceded. "Let's get our rats in a row and show them what real chaos looks like." Myron's fingers paused over the keyboard and she glanced up at them. You two ever think maybe it's not just them watching us? Could be other players in this game. Paranoid much? Jack smirked. Paranoid's just another word for prepared, Rafe said, his tone serious. Let's stay a step ahead of whoever's playing chess with our lives. All right then, Myron said, closing out the terminal. Let's give them a run for their money. Rafe felt a pulse of adrenaline. It was a feeling he knew. That dangerous edge between fear and thrill, where every decision could be your last but also the one that turned the tide. Let's make sure they regret ever laying eyes on us. Jax nodded, a faint grin tugging at his lips. Wouldn't want to disappoint our avid fans now, would we? They left the control center, a plan, or the makings of one, taking shape in the shadows between their words. The corridors of Rust Bucket Central echoed with the sounds of distant machinery and the murmur of life, tenacious and unyielding. As they passed by patchwork shelters and makeshift homes, Rafe caught glimpses of the people they were fighting for, those too stubborn to leave and too proud to surrender. Faces lined with stories of loss and survival, eyes that flickered with hope or resignation. Think they'll all get behind this? Myron asked, her voice low. Rafe shrugged. They don't have to. Just enough to make a difference. And if it's not enough, Jax questioned, always the realist. Then we keep trying, Rafe replied, his gaze steady. We only lose when we stop. They rounded a corner, pausing as a group of children scampered past, laughter ringing out like defiant music in the bleak confines. Rafe watched them go, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Still think this place has a soul, Jax said, nodding after the kids. If it does, it's one hell of a stubborn bastard, Rafe replied, with a flicker of pride. Myron glanced at him, her eyes thoughtful. You know, Rafe, for all your talk, you might actually care about this rust bucket. Don't go spreading that rumor, he said, feigning indignation. I've got a reputation to maintain, after all. Yeah, as the station's #1 troublemaker, Jax chimed in. Rafe winked. And let's keep it that way. They pressed on, the weight of their mission settling into place. The station might be a dying relic held together by spit and hope, but it was their relic, and if they had anything to say about it, they'd see it live to fight another day. The control center's terminal was just the beginning. They had work to do, alliances to forge, systems to sabotage. And if the universe wanted to keep throwing punches, well, they'd punch right back. Rust Bucket Central was more than a forgotten station drifting in the cosmic void. It was a battleground, a testament to the indomitable spirit of those who refused to be caged. And as long as Rafe and his crew had breath in their lungs, they'd fight to keep it free. Because in a universe that seemed hell-bent on grinding them down, defiance was the truest freedom. As they reached the heart of the station, Rafe turned to his companions, a glint of determination in his eyes. Ready to stir up some trouble, Myron nodded, a quiet confidence in her stance. Let's give them something to remember. Jax cracked his knuckles, the ghost of a smile playing on his lips. After all, it's not every day you get to piss off an entire alien race. Rafe chuckled, the sound a mix of bravado and thrill. Then let's make this a day they'll never forget. With that, they set their plan into motion, knowing that whatever awaited them, they were in it together. The universe might be vast and uncaring, but they were determined to carve out their own piece of it. And if that meant raising a little hell along the way, well, they'd always been up for a good party. The control center's terminal was a monument to everything wrong with the world, or more accurately, everything wrong with the universe. Flickering screens and blinking lights gave it all the charm of a cybernetic fever dream. Rafe, Jax, and Myron stood in its ghostly glow, like three thieves casing a particularly uncooperative joint. Well, this is cozy, Jax said, eyeing the terminal. All we need now is a campfire and some marshmallows. Roast them over the burning wreckage of our sanity, maybe, Myron muttered, fingers flying over the keys. Her confidence was a weapon, and she wielded it like a cavalry saber. Rafe leaned over her shoulder, eyes darting across the screens. You've got this, Myron. Just a few tweaks, a little misdirection, and we'll turn their surveillance into a circus act. Yeah, with us as the clowns, Jack said, his sarcasm as reliable as the station's leaky plumbing. Myron's fingers paused, a mischievous glint in her eyes. I dunno, Jax, you've got the face for it. Jax gave her a one-fingered salute. Glad to see you're maintaining your professional standards. Someone has to, she countered, smirking. The terminal hummed with life, data streams flowing like digital rivers. It was a mess of code and schematics, a tapestry of tangled information that only Myron could make sense of, or so they thought. Got it, she announced, a triumphant tone in her voice. Rafe clapped her on the shoulder. See, what I tell you. We're practically ghosts now, more like poltergeists, Jax muttered. Noisy, annoying, and prone to breaking things, Myron was about to argue when the terminal screen blinked ominously. A red alert flashed, accompanied by an insistent beeping that sounded like an angry bird on a caffeine high. Guys, she said, her voice suddenly less confident. What's that? Rafe asked, leaning in closer as if proximity might offer clarity. Looks like a lockdown protocol, Myron said, frowning. Lockdown? Jax echoed, incredulous. You mean we've set off the universe's biggest mousetrap, pretty much, Myron replied, fingers dancing over the keys in a desperate attempt to reverse the unintended damage. The station's AI, a relic programmed to obey alien protocols, was now their unpredictable adversary. It was like playing chess against a toddler with a penchant for setting the board on fire. Rafe slammed a fist against the console, frustration boiling over. We came to disable surveillance, not trigger an interstellar panic room. Well, congratulations, Jax said dryly. You've managed to do both. Myron's fingers blurred as she tried to override the lockdown. Just give me a sec. I can fix this. Better be quick, Rafe urged, glancing at the metal doors sealing shut around them like the mouth of an insidious beast. I'm not keen on becoming a permanent fixture here. Think of it this way, Jax quipped. We're the new must-see attraction at the zoo. Wonder if they'll feed us live critters. Rafe shot him a glare. Not helping, Jax. Just trying to lighten the mood, Jax replied, examining the room for any potential escape routes, an exercise in futility. The lockdown protocol was thorough, covering everything from airlocks to access points. The station was effectively sealed, a cosmic tomb of metal and misplaced optimism. Myron cursed under her breath. This AI is more stubborn than a drunk cat. Every time I think I've got it beat, it throws another curveball. Sounds like my ex, Jax said, earning a smirk from Rafe. Focus, Jax, Rafe chastised, though a hint of amusement colored his words. We need solutions, not reminiscences, right, Jax said, scanning the flickering screens. Any chance we can talk it down? You know, appeal to its better nature or something, Rafe snorted. If it's anything like us, it doesn't have one. Good point, Jax conceded. We're screwed, aren't we? Not yet, Myron interjected, her voice a mix of frustration and determination. I think I can disable the protocol, but it's going to take time. Time we don't have, Rafe muttered, glancing at the sealed door like it might offer some hidden wisdom. Got any better ideas? Myron challenged, not bothering to look up from her work. Just one, Rafe said, his expression grim. We need to distract it. Give it something else to chew on, like what? Jax asked, skeptical. Hell if I know, Rafe admitted, but we need to be unpredictable. Throw it off its game. Myron sighed, nodding, all right. I'll keep hacking away at this. You two figure out how to cause chaos. Chaos is my middle name, Jax said with a wink. Well, actually it's Albert, but you know, save the stand-up routine for later, Rafe said, rolling his eyes. We need to find a way to outsmart a machine that's dead set on locking us up. Jax scratched his head, eyes wandering over the myriad of screens and wires like they might hold the answer. Maybe we can overload it. Hit it with too many inputs, force it to reboot or something. Rafe nodded. It's a start. What do we need? A miracle, Jax replied, smirking. But in lieu of that, maybe some old-fashioned sabotage. Myron gestured to a series of panels on the wall. Those are linked to the mainframe. If you can generate a feedback loop, it might force a reset feedback loop, huh? Jax mused, eyes narrowing with mischief. Sounds like a job for the station's resident cowboy, Rafe raised an eyebrow. Cowboy, yeah, the one who rides the line between genius and insanity, Jax replied, already moving towards the panels. Guess which side I'm leaning towards today? Insanity it is, Rafe said, following him. Jax began tugging at wires, his expression one of fierce concentration. You realize if this goes wrong, we might end up frying the entire system. Guess we'd better not screw it up then, Rafe said, crossing his fingers in mock prayer. Relax, I've done this 1,000 times, Jax assured him, though the fact that he often did things just because he could wasn't exactly comforting. Myron, still hunched over the terminal, glanced up briefly. If you two end up blowing us all to kingdom come, I'm never forgiving you, noted, Jax said, offering a cheeky salute as he worked. It was a gamble, a shot in the dark that might just turn the tables or bury them under them. But then, when hadn't they been gambling with their lives? Jax's fingers danced over the wires, each twist and not an echo of his own rebellious spirit. He was a man who thrived in chaos, turning impossibility into opportunity with a grin. This is either going to be brilliant or catastrophic, Jax said, teeth gleaming in the dim light. Here's hoping for the former, Rafe replied, backing away in case things went south. Jax connected the final wire with the deft touch of a man accustomed to flirting with disaster. The system hummed ominously, a rising crescendo of technological discord. Ready? Jax asked, though the question was rhetorical. Do it, Rafe said, bracing himself. Jax flipped the switch with a flourish and the panel sparked with life, or possibly death. The lights flickered, the screens danced in epileptic seizure, and for a moment everything was noise and chaos. And then silence. Did it work? Rafe asked, hopeful despite himself. Myron's eyes widened as the terminal reset, the alerts vanishing like ghosts at dawn. I think it did. Well, I'll be damned, Jax said, looking genuinely surprised for once. Rafe clapped him on the back. Nicely done, cowboy, Jax grinned, shrugging off the praise. Told you I had a way with machines. Now about that miracle, the door hissed open, the lockdown lifted. The station was theirs again, for the moment at least. Rafe glanced at his companions, a sense of triumph tempered by reality. We've bought ourselves some time. Let's make sure we use it. No rest for the wicked, Jax muttered, already moving towards the exit. Wicked's just another word for smart, Myron said, joining him. As they left the control center, Rafe couldn't help but feel a spark of hope amidst the cynicism. They were still in the game, still fighting, and maybe, just maybe, they'd turn the tide. Next stop? Jax asked as they strode into the corridor. Rafe smiled, the kind of smile that had seen too many battles and loved every one of them. Next stop, we find out who's running this show, and then? Myron inquired, curiosity piqued. We show them why betting against humans is a bad idea, Rafe replied, his voice a promise. Because in the vast, uncaring universe, defiance was their greatest weapon, and they intended to use it to the fullest. Rafe leaned against the wall, arms crossed in that way he did when he was contemplating either a brilliant plan or a complete disaster. So, he said, tapping his foot, anyone got a plan that doesn't involve us getting spaced or quarantined like exotic bacteria? Myron was still fiddling with the terminal, her fingers a blur over the keys. Well, we do have one ace up our sleeve, she said, not taking her eyes off the screen. Jax, lounging like he'd just stumbled out of a bar rather than a near-death experience, raised an eyebrow. Please tell me it's not the one involving our charming personalities, 'cause I'm fresh out of charm. Myron smirked. Nope, this one's better. Quantum anomalies. Rafe gave a low whistle. The wormhole, that unstable bundle of cosmic joy. Exactly, Myron replied, her eyes lighting up with a mix of excitement and mischief. If we can manipulate the station's quantum systems, we might just be able to mask our signatures. Jack scratched his chin, skepticism oozing from every pore. You're talking about using the wormhole anomalies to render us invisible, like some kind of high-stakes cosmic hide-and-seek. Essentially, Myron confirmed. Rafe nodded slowly, the gears in his head clicking into place. We'd be exploiting the very chaos that makes this place a nightmare. Exactly, Myron said, a grin sneaking onto her face. Turn their biggest asset into our greatest ally, Jax said, or our quickest ticket to becoming quantum soup. Life's a gamble, Rafe shrugged, flashing a grin. And I've never been good at folding. Myron glanced up, a serious look on her face. It's risky as hell. We'll need to time it right, coordinate our movements perfectly. Well, Jax drawled, it's not like we've got anything better to do. Then let's get to it, Rafe said, casting a wary eye around the room like the walls themselves might be listening. They moved quickly, the urgency of their situation adding a frenetic energy to their steps. The corridors of the station wound around them like the guts of some ancient beast, each turn a potential dead end or salvation. Rafe couldn't help but chuckle. You know, when I signed up for this gig, I thought space station meant fancy tech and maybe a drink with an umbrella in it. Jack snorted. And instead we got alien surveillance and a date with a wormhole. Rafe shrugged. Life's full of surprises. They reached the quantum systems room, the heart of the station's wormhole manipulation tech. It was a mess of screens, wires, and that faint hum of potential energy, like a coiled spring ready to unleash its fury. Myron dove into the controls, her expression one of fierce concentration. This isn't just flipping switches, folks. One mistake and we could destabilize the whole system. Jax leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Sounds like a Tuesday. Rafe cracked his knuckles, a nervous habit. Okay, so what do you need from us? I'll need you two to monitor the energy fluctuations, Myron said, pointing to the screens. If the levels spike, we'll need to recalibrate on the fly. Jax nodded, though his expression was one of reluctant acceptance. I'm not saying this is insanity, but I'm not saying it either. Your confidence is inspiring, Rafe deadpanned, turning his attention to the screens. But let's just get this done before I start seeing my life flash before my eyes. Myron worked with the kind of intensity that suggested failure was not an option. Her hands moved swiftly, adjusting parameters and inputting commands. The screens lit up with data, numbers dancing like fireflies in the dark. All right, Myron said finally, her voice steady. We're ready. Jax glanced at the screens, then back at her. Ready for what exactly? To become the universe's most complex math problem. Ready to disappear, Myron replied, a spark of defiance in her eyes. Well, that's one way to spend a Friday night, Jax said, stepping back from the console. Myron initiated the sequence, the hum of the systems growing to a crescendo that resonated through their bones. It was a sound that promised either salvation or disaster, no middle ground. The station shuddered, a faint tremor that ran through the floor. Rafe felt his heart skip a beat. That's normal, right? Define normal, Myron shot back, her focus unbroken. Rafe watched the energy readings on the screen, the numbers climbing in a way that suggested they might be doing more than just tickling the edges of chaos. We're starting to spike here. Myron adjusted the controls, her movements precise and deliberate. I've got it, just a little more. The room seemed to hold its breath, the weight of anticipation like a physical presence. Rafe could feel the adrenaline pumping through his veins, a heady mix of fear and exhilaration. Then just as suddenly as it began, the tremor ceased. The screens lit up with confirmation, the data streams leveling out to a steady hum. Did we do it? Jax asked, a note of disbelief in his voice. Myron let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Yeah, we're invisible. Rafe couldn't help but smile. I'll be damned you did it. Jax clapped his hands together, a triumphant grin on his face. Well, color me impressed. We're ghosts. Spectral, intangible, and ready to haunt some unsuspecting aliens. Let's hope they're superstitious, Rafe said, turning towards the door. Because now we've got the upper hand. The hallway outside felt different somehow, a secret path only they could walk. Rafe led the way, confidence restored, his steps lighter despite the stakes. Next step, Jax asked, falling into stride beside him. Rafe's grin widened. We take the fight to them, they won't know what hit him. They moved through the station with purpose, the weight of their invisibility both a shield and a weapon. The corridors twisted and turned, a maze of metal and opportunity. You know, Jax said, breaking the silence, I never thought I'd be grateful for a quantum anomaly. Rafe chuckled. Life's funny that way. You spend your whole existence avoiding chaos, only to find it's your best friend. Guess that makes us chaos enthusiasts, Myron added, her tone wry. Better than chaos victims, Rafe replied, leading them towards the central hub. Now let's make sure our hosts realize just how much trouble they are in. As they approached the hub, Rafe's mind was already racing ahead, strategizing their next move. The hub was the brain of the station, the heart that pulsed with alien intent. All right, Rafe said as they reached the entrance. We need to find out who's pulling the strings here. Jax nodded, his expression serious. And then we pull the rug out from under them. Myron adjusted her tool bag, ready for whatever lay ahead. Let's do this. Make them regret ever underestimating humans. Inside, the hub was a symphony of activity, screens flickering, data streams flowing like rivers of light. It was a place of power, and they intended to claim it. Rafe glanced at the others, his voice firm. Remember, we're ghosts, silent, deadly, and unpredictable. Like a bad date, Jax quipped, checking his gear. They moved in, each step careful and deliberate. The alien tech was impressive, but they had the advantage of surprise and a good bit of human stubbornness. Myron zeroed in on a central console, her eyes narrowing with intent. This is it. The main hub. If we can gain access, we can control the station. Then let's get to work, Rafe said, watching as she connected her tools to the alien systems. She worked quickly, her expertise shining through as she navigated the unfamiliar tech. The others kept watch, aware that their presence could be discovered at any moment. Any sign of company? Rafe asked, glancing around. Jax shook his head. Not yet, but I wouldn't bet on that lasting. Myron worked her magic, the console responding to her touch with a reluctant compliance. It was a battle of wills, human ingenuity versus alien technology. We're in, Myron announced, triumph in her voice. I've got control. Rafe felt a surge of satisfaction. Nice work. Now let's see what secrets they've been hiding. The data poured in, a wealth of information that painted a picture of the station's true purpose. It was a surveillance hub, a watchful eye trained on the galaxy. Jax leaned in, his expression one of incredulity. They've been monitoring everything, every jump, every signal, like cosmic voyeurs, Rafe muttered, shaking his head. No wonder they didn't want us poking around. Myron accessed the surveillance logs, her expression darkening. There's more. They've been cataloging species, assessing threats. Rafe's blood ran cold. And we're on that list, I bet. Top of the list, Myron confirmed, her voice grim. Well, Jax said, a wry smile tugging at his lips, at least we're number one in something. Rafe clenched his fists, anger simmering beneath the surface. They're not just watching, they're planning, coordinating. Then let's throw a wrench in their plans, Myron suggested, her determination unwavering. We can disrupt their systems, make them blind, Jax added. Rafe nodded, a plan forming. And while they're stumbling in the dark, we make our move. The hub was a treasure trove of opportunity, each system a potential point of sabotage. They moved swiftly, ensuring their actions would leave the aliens helpless and confused. Myron targeted the communication arrays, severing their links to the broader network. Jax focused on the surveillance systems, ensuring their invisibility remained intact. We're crippling them, Myron said, satisfaction lacing her words. Rafe watched their progress, pride swelling in his chest. They were turning the tide, using the very tools of their enemies against them. Keep it up, Rafe urged. We're giving them a taste of their own medicine. The air thrummed with the intensity of their actions, the knowledge that they were striking a blow for humanity, a powerful motivator. As they worked, a new alert flashed on the screen, a warning of incoming vessels. The aliens were responding, and they wouldn't be happy. Looks like we've ruffled some feathers, Jax observed, his tone amused. Good, Rafe replied, his grin sharp. Let them come, we're ready. Myron finished her task, disconnecting from the console with a triumphant flourish. We've done all we can here. Time to move. Rafe nodded, leading them back towards the exit. They had made their mark, and now it was time to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. As they left the hub, Rafe's mind was already on the next step. They had thrown the first punch, and the aliens would be reeling. "Let's regroup," Rafe said, determination in his voice. "Plan our next move." Jax fell in beside him, a spring in his step. "This is turning into quite the adventure." "Adventure's one word for it," Rafe agreed. "But it's not over yet." They moved with purpose, each step a message to their unseen adversaries. Humans were not to be underestimated, and they intended to prove it. As they disappeared into the shadows, Rafe couldn't help but feel a sense of exhilaration. They were fighting back, and it felt damn good. And as the station braced for the chaos to come, Rafe knew one thing for certain: they wouldn't go down without a fight. The station was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that usually meant something terrible was about to happen. Rafe, Jax, and Myron were in the belly of the beast now, the central hub, where blinking lights and flickering screens made everything look like a bad disco, minus the fun. "Anyone else feel like a sitting duck out here?" Jax asked, glancing nervously around. His fingers twitched like he was itching to pull a trigger or maybe just get the hell out. Rafe snorted. "Sitting ducks, maybe. But we're the ones holding the shotgun." Myron was still messing with the terminal, fingers flying over keys with the kind of focus that suggested she really didn't want to die today. "Funny thing about shotguns," she muttered. "They don't do much good when you're up against a tank, but we've got the element of surprise," Rafe said, a toothy grin splitting his face. "And a good bit of spite." "Spite? That's your plan?" Jax raised an eyebrow. "I'm feeling really confident now." "Just keep your panties on," Myron said, not looking up from her work. "We're not dead yet." The screens hummed, casting ghostly shadows that danced across their faces. Outside, the station was a hive of activity, the aliens scrambling to respond to the chaos Rafe and his team had unleashed. "Looks like we kicked the hornet's nest," Jax observed, watching the chaos unfold on the monitors. "They're not happy." "Good," Rafe replied. "Happy aliens make poor decision makers." Myron finally stepped back from the terminal, satisfaction written across her face. "We've bought ourselves some time. They're blind, deaf, and about to be very pissed." "Time to make our move then," Rafe said, nodding towards the exit. "Before they figure out how to swat us." But as they turned to leave, an alert blared through the station, a shrill noise that made Rafe's skin crawl. "Incoming vessels," the cold, mechanical voice announced, as if it were inviting them to a particularly unpleasant dinner party. "Great," Jax muttered, sarcasm dripping from his words. More guests at this horrible shindig. They bolted down the corridor, the sound of their footsteps echoing like a countdown to doom. The station's structure groaned under the weight of its own tension, every creak and shudder a reminder of how fragile their situation was. "Why do I get the feeling we're running out of frying pans to jump into?" Myron panted as they turned a corner. "Probably because we've hit the bottom of the fire," Jax shot back. They skidded to a halt at a junction, Rafe taking a moment to catch his breath. "We need to rally the others. Get everyone ready for whatever comes next." The refugee sector of the station was a mess, even on a good day. Today, it looked like someone had decided to throw a riot and forgotten to send the invitations. People milled about in confusion, fear etched into every line of their faces. "All right, listen up," Rafe bellowed, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We've got incoming ships, and they're not here to deliver cookies." A murmur rippled through the crowd, panic rising like bile. "Settle down," Jax added, his tone sharp. "We're not out of this yet." Myron stepped forward, her voice steady. "We've got a plan. A damn good one. But we need all of you to keep your heads." Rafe scanned the crowd, looking for signs of dissent or collapse. The station might be falling apart, but he'd be damned if they fell apart with it. "Remember what we're fighting for," he said, his voice dropping to a growl. "We're not just numbers on some alien's clipboard." "Yeah, we're people," Jax interjected. "And let's make sure they never forget it." They began organizing, directing people to defensive positions, handing out what little weaponry they had scrounged together. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. "You think we're gonna make it?" Jax asked as they took a moment to survey the scene. Rafe shrugged. "No idea, But it beats sitting around waiting for the end. Optimism, thy name is Rafe, Myron said dryly. The tension thickened, a palpable force pressing down on everyone like a wet blanket. Rafe felt it in his bones, the sense that they were standing on the edge of something vast and terrible. In the distance, the sound of approaching engines was a low, ominous rumble. The alien ships were coming and they weren't bringing a welcome mat. "Here we go," Jax muttered, his hands tightening around his weapon. Rafe took a deep breath, feeling the weight of leadership settling heavy on his shoulders. "Hold the line. We've come this far. Let's not screw it up now." As the ships drew closer, the air grew electric with anticipation and fear. They could almost taste it, the metallic tang of adrenaline mixed with terror. "Remember," Myron said, her voice calm and firm, "we're invisible to them. Use that to our advantage." A series of explosions lit up the sector, sending shockwaves through the structure. The aliens were testing their defenses, probing for weaknesses. "Looks like they're not here to negotiate," Jax said, a grim smile on his lips. "Good," Rafe replied, grim determination in his eyes. "We're not much for talking anyway." The first wave hit, the aliens storming the sector with a fury that was almost beautiful in its destructive power. But the humans held their ground, driven by desperation and a refusal to be cornered. The air was filled with the sounds of battle, shouts, gunfire, the dull thud of impacts. It was chaos, pure and unfiltered, and Rafe found himself right in the center of it. "Watch your left," Myron shouted, ducking as a blast tore through the wall beside her. Rafe swung his weapon around, taking down the alien with a well-aimed shot. "Thanks," he grunted, reloading quickly. Jax was a whirlwind of motion, moving from cover to cover, his weapon spitting fire. "Gotta love a classic last stand," he quipped, his voice barely audible over the din. Rafe knew they couldn't hold out forever. The aliens were too many, too determined, and their resources were running thin. But that didn't mean they'd go quietly. "Keep pushing," Rafe yelled, rallying those around him. "We're not done yet." The battle raged on, a brutal dance of survival. The humans fought with everything they had, refusing to give an inch without a fight. "Looks like they really want us dead," Jax said, firing off another burst. "Can't say I blame them. Just focus," Myron snapped, frustration edging her voice. "We're not finished here." But even as they held the line, Rafe knew they were living on borrowed time. Sooner or later, the weight of numbers would crush them. "We need a plan," he shouted, ducking as an explosion rocked the ground. "Something big." Myron shot him a look, a mix of exasperation and disbelief. "Big? We're hanging by a thread and you want big?" Rafe gave her a fierce grin. "Big's all we've got left." The fight dragged on, every second feeling like an eternity. They were battered, bruised, pushed to their limits. But still they fought on, fueled by the stubborn refusal to give in. Finally, a lull in the battle gave them a moment to breathe, to regroup. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid scent of spent energy. "Well," Jax said, wiping sweat from his brow, "that was fun. Can't wait to see what they send next." Rafe looked around, taking stock of their situation. It wasn't good, but they were still standing, and that was something. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "We need to regroup, come up with a counterattack." "Counterattack?" Myron echoed, incredulous. "We're barely holding on as it is. We have to try," Rafe insisted. "It's either that or wait for them to overwhelm us." Jax sighed, nodding reluctantly. "He's right. We've got to hit back, make them think twice about underestimating us." They quickly devised a plan, a desperate gamble that might just buy them enough time to survive. It was risky, but they didn't have much choice. "Okay, here's what we do," Rafe began, outlining the plan in quick, efficient strokes. "We hit them hard, hit them fast, and then get the hell out." Myron was already scanning the area, looking for potential weak spots. "If we can draw them in, we might be able to trap them, like baiting a trap," Jax said, a wry smile on his face. "Sounds fun." The plan was reckless, a last-ditch effort that hinged on timing and a fair bit of luck. But as Rafe looked at his team, he felt a flicker of hope. They were battered, beaten, but not broken. "Let's make them regret ever crossing us," he said, determination hardening his voice. The team nodded, readying themselves for the next wave. The odds were against them, but they'd come too far to back down now. As they prepared to launch their counterattack, Rafe allowed himself a small smile. They were outgunned, outnumbered, but never outclassed. And for humans, that was more than enough. The station thrummed with tension as they moved into position, every nerve on edge, every instinct screaming of danger. But as Rafe looked at his team, he knew they had one thing the aliens didn't: the unyielding defiance of the human spirit. "Let's show them what we're made of," he said, his voice a low growl. And with that, they plunged back into the fray, ready to fight, ready to prove they were more than just targets in someone else's game. They were human, and they were not to be underestimated. The station creaked like an old man getting out of bed, every metallic groan a reminder that they were perched on the brink of oblivion. Rafe felt the weight of that knowledge like a bad hangover, the kind that made you swear you'd never touch space whiskey again. Not that he could afford the luxury of drunken regrets right now. Myron was hunched over the main terminal, her fingers dancing across the keys with the kind of focus that made you wonder if she could hear a word anyone was saying. Rafe decided to test that theory. "Hey, Myron," he barked, loud enough to wake the dead or at least the perpetually sleep-deprived. "Find us a miracle yet." She didn't even flinch, just kept typing away like the universe was a particularly stubborn crossword puzzle. "Working on it," she muttered, her voice the kind of distracted you'd expect from someone defusing a bomb. "And could you keep your existential crises to a dull roar?" "I'm trying to think." Rafe exchanged a glance with Jax, who was busy checking his weapon with the care of a man who expected it to betray him at any moment. "She's gonna save us, right?" Jax asked, not sounding entirely convinced. "Either that or we'll get an interesting obituary," Rafe replied, scratching at the stubble on his chin. "Just make sure they spell my name right." "Right, because Rafe is so easy to screw up," Jax shot back, his sarcastic smile just a little too tight. The tension in the room was thick enough to chew on, and Rafe hated chewing on anything that wasn't a half-decent sandwich. It was the anticipation that got to him, the waiting, the knowledge that at any moment things could go from bad to thermonuclear. Suddenly, Myron let out a noise that was half gasp, half triumphant cackle. "I got it," she exclaimed, her eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and something that looked disturbingly like hope. Rafe strode over, leaning in to peer at the screen. "Got what? Please tell me it's not another 'oops, we're doomed' message." She shook her head, a wide grin spreading across her face. "Nope. I found a weak spot. A flaw in their system." He raised an eyebrow, skepticism the only thing he trusted without reservation. "A flaw? You sure it's not a feature?" "Their surveillance system," she explained, her fingers tapping the screen like it was a drum for her genius. "They've got a blind spot. Something they missed when they were busy being so damn superior." Jax perked up at that, his interest piqued. "A blind spot? Please tell me it's the size of a planet." "Not quite," Myron admitted, "but it's enough. If we hit them there, we can disrupt their control over the station. Maybe even give them a taste of their own medicine." Rafe crossed his arms, considering the possibilities. "So, we get them to look the other way while we poke them in the eye, more or less," she said. "But it's gonna require precision. Screw it up and we might as well be handing them our heads on a silver platter." "Sounds like my kind of party," Jax said, checking the charge on his weapon. "What do we have to lose? Our lives, our dignity, and our one chance at sticking it to these overgrown lizards," Rafe replied dryly. "But hey, I've risked all that for less." Myron bit her lip, the gears in her head turning like rusted machinery. "I'll need to reroute the systems, get past their firewalls. And we'll need to take out those incoming ships or this whole plan goes up in smoke." Rafe nodded, a plan forming in his mind. "All right then. We hit them fast, hit them hard. Use their blind spot to our advantage while Myron does her magic." Jax gave a low whistle. "Magic, huh? Didn't know you were a believer, Rafe." "I'm a believer in one thing," Rafe replied, his gaze hardening. "Not going quietly." They spent the next few minutes hashing out the details, a flurry of whispered strategies and pointed gestures. It was a desperate plan, bordering on suicidal, but desperation was the fuel that kept them going. If they didn't act now, they'd never get another chance. As they moved into position, Rafe took a moment to look around. His team was ragged, weary, but there was a fire in their eyes that refused to be snuffed out. They were survivors, every last one of them, and that counted for something. "All right, places everyone," Rafe said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had nothing left to lose. "Remember, this is our shot. Make it count." Myron set to work, her fingers flying over the terminal with the precision of a surgeon. Rafe watched her, feeling the tension coil in his gut like a snake ready to strike. This had to work. It just had to. Jack stood by, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of movement. "So, what's the plan if this doesn't go off like we hope?" Rafe shrugged, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Improvise and pray to whatever deity is least likely to smite us. Good thing I've always been an atheist," Jax replied, his grin as sharp as a razor. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness, each one stretching into eternity. Rafe felt like he was holding his breath, waiting for the moment when everything would either fall into place or explode spectacularly in their faces. Finally, Myron looked up, her face flushed with excitement and determination. "All right, I've got it set. We're ready to go." "Then let's get this over with," Rafe said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "Give them hell." With a few final keystrokes, Myron activated the hack, the terminal's screen lighting up with streams of data that pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. The station shuddered, as if aware of the chaos about to unfold. "Here goes nothing," Jax muttered, checking his weapon one last time. The first thing they noticed was the sudden, jarring silence as the station's alarms cut out, replaced by the distant hum of alien ships searching for a fight. It was a strange, eerie stillness, like the calm before a storm. Then the screens flickered to life, displaying frantic alien communications, their once unbreakable codes now laid bare. Rafe felt a surge of exhilaration at the sight. They'd done it. They'd actually pulled it off. "Look at that," Myron said, her voice triumphant. "We've got front row seats to their downfall. Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Rafe warned, though he couldn't quite hide the satisfaction in his own voice. "We're not out of the woods yet." The alien ships outside were still a threat, and they needed to act quickly if they wanted to capitalize on their advantage. Rafe issued orders with the confidence of a man who had already defied the odds once today. "Jax, take a team and hit their weak points. We need to keep them off balance, make sure they don't regroup." "On it," Jax replied, already moving towards the exit. "Let's go give them something to remember us by." With Jax and his team gone, Rafe turned his attention back to Myron. "Can you keep them distracted long enough for us to make a real impact?" She nodded, her expression focused. "I'll keep them busy," she promised. "Let's see how they like dealing with a little chaos." "Chaos is our specialty," Rafe said, a fierce grin spreading across his face. "Let's make it count." As Myron worked her magic, Rafe watched the screens for any sign that their plan was working. The alien systems were in disarray, their communications a tangled mess of conflicting orders and panicked messages. "They're scrambling," Myron reported, her eyes locked on the data streaming across the terminal. "They don't know what hit them." Rafe felt a swell of vindication at the sight. "Good. Let's keep it that way." Outside, the sounds of battle were a reminder that their work was far from over. Rafe could hear the distant rumble of explosions, the sharp cracks of gunfire, and he knew that every second they held out was a victory. "We've got them on the ropes," Myron said, her voice filled with the kind of determination that could move mountains. "Now we just need to land the knockout punch." Rafe nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. They needed to keep pushing, to take advantage of every opportunity, no matter how small. "Jax's team is making progress," he noted, watching as the alien ships struggled to maintain their positions. "They're not ready for this kind of fight." "Let's hope it stays that way," Myron replied, her fingers still flying over the keys. "I've got a few more tricks up my sleeve." Rafe couldn't help but admire her resilience. In the face of overwhelming odds, she'd found a way to turn the tide. It was a testament to the human spirit, the refusal to surrender even when the end seemed inevitable. "Keep it up," he urged, feeling a renewed sense of hope. "We're getting there." They worked in tandem, a seamless blend of strategy and execution, each action calculated to maximize the chaos they'd unleashed. It was a beautiful thing, the kind of audacious gamble that only humans could pull off. The minutes stretched on, each one bringing them closer to victory. But Rafe knew they couldn't afford to relax, not yet. The aliens wouldn't give up easily, and every second counted. "Almost there," Myron said, her voice tinged with excitement. "Just a little longer." Rafe nodded, his focus unwavering. "We're close. Let's finish this." And together they prepared to deliver the final blow, to strike a decisive blow against their enemies. It was a moment of clarity, a realization that they were capable of so much more than anyone had ever given them credit for. In the end, it wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that they were more than just pawns in someone else's game. They were human, and they would not go quietly into the night. Rafe stood back, watching the screens flicker like old-world television sets moments from broadcasting Armageddon. If he squinted, he could almost see the alien commanders panicking, their scales prickling with anxiety. McDonald's ice cream machines had a better uptime record than this surveillance system now. Jax returned, a smug grin plastered on his face like a drunk at last orders. "Been a while since I've seen aliens lose their cool. It's like watching cats freak out over cucumbers." "Glad we could provide some entertainment value," Rafe replied, leaning over Myron's shoulder. She was still working the terminal, her fingers flying faster than a politician making excuses. "How's it looking, Myron?" "Like a mess I'd rather not clean up," she muttered. "But we've got control over the main systems." "The aliens are flailing around in the dark like toddlers with a nightlight." Rafe nodded, feeling a rare, warm sense of triumph. "Time for the final curtain call, then. Let's make them regret inviting us to their little party." "Feels more like we gate-crashed it," Jax commented, popping the power cell out of his weapon, checking for dust. "But hey, they should have known better than to leave the door open." Myron ignored them, focusing on rerouting the remaining power to their systems. "Give me a minute. I'll have the whole station dancing to our tune." A loud clang echoed through Rust Bucket Central, the station groaning like a retiree with a bad knee. Rafe glanced up, half expecting the ceiling to cave in. But they were still in one piece. For now. "How's the wormhole looking?" Rafe asked, pacing like a caffeinated squirrel in a cage. Myron spared a glance at him, looking like she was about to dive into a rant about quantum mechanics. "It's like a black hole's less stable cousin. We need to stabilize it just long enough to slip through. Otherwise, we're toast." "Burnt toast," Jax added helpfully. With a side of cosmic jam, Rafe shot him a look. "If you're done with the culinary metaphors, we've got a job to finish." "Focus." Jax rolled his eyes but said nothing, which in itself was a minor miracle. They couldn't afford distractions now, not when they were this close. "All right," Myron said, taking a deep breath. "I've set the systems to give us a window through the wormhole. We've got a few minutes tops before it collapses. Just like my last relationship," Rafe quipped. "What's the status on the alien ships?" Jax checked his display, the light casting shadows over his stern face. "They're still trying to regroup, but they've got less coordination than a drunk at a dance-off. If we hit them now, we can keep them off our backs long enough to make a run for it." "Perfect. Let's make it count, people." Rafe's voice had the edge of a man dangling over a cliff, determined not to look down. They moved like clockwork, a ragtag team of misfits who, against all odds, had found a way to work in harmony, or at least something resembling it. Every step felt like threading a needle with a sledgehammer, but they were getting there. Myron worked her magic on the terminal, the screens lighting up with code and data streams. "I've got control of the station's defenses. Let's see how they like a taste of their own medicine." "Dish it out," Myron, Rafe said, his voice a growl of anticipation. "Let's see them squirm." With a few keystrokes, Myron unleashed chaos upon the alien ships. Automated turrets sprang to life, firing on their former masters with a vengeance. It was poetic in a way, watching the hunters become the hunted. "Looks like they can't handle their own toys," Jax observed, watching the alien formation scatter like cockroaches under a light. "Always knew they were compensating for something." Myron grinned, a devilish glint in her eye. "We've got them on the run. Now we just need to keep push. "Honey, I'm ready to shove," Rafe said, his eyes fixed on the chaos unfolding outside. "Let's make sure they remember us." The station's defenses pummeled the alien fleet, driving them back in a shower of fire and debris. The wormhole loomed in the distance, a swirling vortex of unstable energy that promised both salvation and doom. "Time to go," Rafe ordered. "We've kicked the hornet's nest. Now let's get out before they start stinging." The team moved with practiced precision, heading towards the hangar where their ship awaited. It wasn't much a hunk of scrap and stubbornness, but it was theirs, and it would get them out of this mess. As they reached the ship, Rafe paused, glancing back at the station. "Hard to believe we pulled it off," he said, a note of disbelief in his voice. Myron shrugged, already working on the pre-flight checks. "We're either the luckiest or unluckiest bunch in the galaxy. But right now, I don't care which." Jax slapped Rafe on the back, his grin wider than a wormhole's maw. "Told you we'd make it. Just needed to give him a little human ingenuity, or insanity," Rafe replied, a ghost of a smile on his lips. They boarded the ship, the engines rumbling to life with a sound that was more comforting than any lullaby. As they took off, the station fading into the distance, the wormhole loomed ahead, a challenge and a promise all rolled into one. "Here goes nothing," Myron muttered, guiding the ship towards the vortex. "Just another day in paradise," Jax quipped, strapping himself in. Rafe didn't say anything, his attention focused on the approaching maelstrom. If this worked, they'd be home free. If it didn't, well, he'd always wondered what being turned into cosmic dust felt like. They entered the wormhole, the ship shuddering under the strain. Lights flickered, alarms blared, and for a moment it felt like riding a roller coaster designed by someone with a vendetta against sanity. But then, silence. The kind of silence that made you question if you were still alive. Slowly the ship settled, the shaking subsided, and they found themselves on the other side. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. "We're through," Myron announced, her voice shaky with relief. "We're clear, alive and kicking," Jax confirmed, a laugh escaping him. Against all odds, Rafe leaned back in his seat, a long exhale leaving him. "Let's not make a habit of this. Speak for yourself," Myron said, her eyes alight with triumph. "I've never felt more alive." Rafe chuckled, a sound that surprised even him. "All right, let's get out of here before they change their minds." Next stop, anywhere but here. As they sailed away from the station and the chaos left in their wake, Rafe allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They'd faced the impossible and come out the other side, a little more bruised and battered, but alive. And for now, that was enough. The ship hummed beneath them, a steady rhythm that was both reassuring and resolute. They'd defied the odds, taken on the impossible, and somehow managed to make it out intact. Almost like pulling off a magic trick, with a finale that left everyone, including themselves, in disbelief. "Where to now?" Jax asked, breaking the contented silence. "Any place in particular?" Rafe shrugged, the weight of command feeling lighter now. "Anywhere that's got a bar, cheap drinks, and no aliens looking to mount our heads on their walls." "Amen to that," Myron said, setting a course. "I could use a stiff drink and some terrible music." Jax leaned back, his grin as persistent as ever. "And maybe a shower." "I smell like a laundry bag full of regret," Rafe snorted, relaxing into his seat. "Let's just say it adds character." The stars stretched out before them, an endless canvas of possibilities. For the first time in a long time, Rafe felt something akin to hope. They were free, at least for now, and that was more than they dared to dream. "Hey, Rafe," Jax said, breaking into his thoughts. "Yeah, think we'll find somewhere to call home?" Rafe considered the question, the enormity of it. Home was a concept he hadn't entertained in a long time. But maybe, just maybe, it was out there, waiting for them. "Who knows?" Rafe replied, a new determination in his voice. "But I'll be damned if we stop looking." With that, they settled into the journey ahead, a collective sigh of relief marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. They were a motley crew of survivors, united by their shared defiance, tethered by bonds forged in the crucible of chaos. And though the future was uncertain, they faced it with something they hadn't had before: the knowledge that they could push back against the dark, carve out a space for themselves, and laugh in the face of the impossible. As they vanished into the stars, Rafe allowed himself a final, satisfied smile. They'd made it, not just as individuals but as something more, a team, maybe even a family of sorts. The universe was vast, unpredictable, and unforgiving, but they wouldn't face it alone. They'd defied the odds, rewritten their own fate, and now they'd see what lay beyond the horizon. So they flew on, leaving behind the ruins of their past and embracing the vastness ahead. The galaxy was theirs for the taking, and they were ready to take it on. Game on, universe, game on. The station, or what was left of it, creaked and groaned like an ancient door in a haunted house. Rust Bucket Central was doing its best impression of a space-age retirement home, struggling to hold itself together amidst the scars of recent chaos. The air hung heavy with the scent of burnt circuits and ozone, a testament to their recent victory over the alien armada. It was a smell that could make you nostalgic for the days when your biggest worry was figuring out how to pay rent. Rafe stood at the central hub, watching the screens flickering like they were auditioning for a role in a techno-horror movie. He'd never been a sentimental type, but seeing the refugees busily rebuilding their little slice of the universe tugged at something deep inside. Or maybe that was just last night's dinner making a comeback. Either way, there was something oddly uplifting about the whole scene. Jax lounged nearby, tossing a ball in the air like he had all the time in the world. "So, when's the parade?" he asked, catching the ball without looking. "I'm practicing my royal wave." Rafe snorted. "Keep dreaming, Jax." "I'd be more worried about the alien comeback tour." Jax nodded, a grin spreading across his face. "Yeah, they always do love an encore, especially when they get their asses handed to them." Rafe shook his head, unable to suppress a smile. "Let's make sure we're ready for the next act then. Myron's working her magic on the systems, right?" "Like a wizard with a caffeine addiction," Jax replied. "The woman's on a first-name basis with half the circuits on this station." Rafe chuckled, picturing Myron at her terminal, fingers flying over the keys with a kind of focused intensity that would shame most concert pianists. "Good. We'll need every edge we can get." As if summoned by their conversation, Myron appeared, wiping a smudge of grease from her cheek with the back of her hand. "Station's defenses are back online," she announced, her voice carrying the satisfaction of a job well done. "I've set up a few surprises for any uninvited guests. Explosive party favors," Jax suggested, eyes glinting with mischief. "You know me too well," Myron replied with a smirk. "Nothing says welcome back like a nice, big explosion." Rafe felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of camaraderie stronger than any bond he'd felt before. They were a motley crew, but damn it, they were his motley crew, and they'd carved out a corner of the universe for themselves against all odds. "So, what's next, Captain?" Myron asked, arms crossed, eyes sharp and expectant. Rafe sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Rebuild first, party later. We've got a station to patch up and people to organize, and we need to keep an eye on the wormhole. Last thing we need is an intergalactic surprise party," Jax groaned. "Ugh, responsibility, my least favorite word." "Get used to it," Rafe said, a grin tugging at his lips. "We're not just playing games anymore. We're in charge of this ragtag circus now." "Great," Jax grumbled. "I was hoping to avoid adulthood for another decade or so." Myron laughed, and it felt good to hear the sound. "You'll manage," she said. "Besides, where else will you find this kind of excitement?" Jax considered this, then shrugged. "True. Beats a desk job, I guess." They moved through the station, assessing the damage and making plans. It was a patchwork quilt of chaos and opportunity, with refugees working alongside them, piecing together the remnants of their homes. Hope was a fragile thing, but here, Amidst the ruins, it was taking root. Rafe stopped by a group of engineers, offering a few words of encouragement and a promise to get them the supplies they needed. It was surreal, this new role of leadership and responsibility, but it fit him in a way that surprised even himself. Jax sidled up to him. "You sure you're cut out for this, boss?" "Nope," Rafe replied honestly. "But I'd rather screw it up trying than do nothing at all." Jax laughed, clapping him on the shoulder. "Spoken like a true hero or an idiot." "The line gets blurry sometimes." "Tell me about it," Rafe said, shaking his head. "But we're all in this together." They continued their tour, the sound of construction and conversation filling the air. It was a symphony of survival and defiance, a melody that stirred something deep within Rafe's soul. He could almost convince himself that it was hope. As the day wore on, they gathered in the makeshift command center, a room filled with terminals and hastily scribbled plans. Myron was already there, poring over a display of data, her mind a whirl of calculations and contingencies. "Looks like we're making progress," Rafe said, sliding into a seat beside her. "Yeah," Myron replied, glancing up. "The station's holding together and we've got the defenses ready in case our uninvited guests decide to pop by." Rafe nodded, contemplating the swirling data before them. "Think they'll be back?" Myron shrugged. "Hard to say. Aliens can be stubborn and they hate losing face, but we'll be ready for them." "Always the optimist," Jax said, entering the room with his usual swagger. "What's the plan, boss? More patchwork, or are we gonna look for some fireworks?" "Patchwork first, pyrotechnics second," Rafe replied. "But I wouldn't mind a few surprises up our sleeve." Jax leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "You know, if we make it through all this, we could open a theme park. Alien Smackdown, the ride." Rafe snorted. "Only if you're the mascot." "Deal," Jax said, grinning. "Just make sure to put my name on the merchandise." Myron rolled her eyes, but the smile on her face betrayed her amusement. "Let's get through today first. Then we can talk about your theme park empire." The hours ticked by as they coordinated efforts, their makeshift team coming together with a kind of ragged efficiency that would have impressed even the most cynical observer. Rafe couldn't help but feel a swelling pride at the sight. Maybe they weren't just surviving. Maybe, just maybe, they were building something worth fighting for. As the day began to wane, they gathered once more, a small group gathered in the heart of the station. Refugees mingled with renegades, the lines between them blurring into something new and hopeful. Jax raised a glass, his voice ringing out over the crowd. "To us," he declared, his tone a mix of sarcasm and sincerity. "The misfits, the maniacs, and the miracle workers." Laughter and cheers followed, the sound echoing through the station's battered halls. Rafe lifted his own glass, a rare smile breaking free. "To the future," he added, the words holding more weight than any toast he'd ever made. Myron clinked her glass against his, her eyes bright with determination. "And to whatever it throws at us. We'll be ready." Rafe nodded, the warmth spreading through him a testament to their resolve. They'd faced the impossible and come out the other side. Now they had a chance to shape their own destiny, to defend what they'd fought so hard to claim. "Here's to freedom," Rafe said, his voice carrying a hard edge of resolve. "And here's to keeping it." The crowd echoed his sentiment, a chorus of voices united in their defiance. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't seem like an insurmountable obstacle. It seemed like a challenge, a call to arms that they were ready to answer. As the night wore on, the station buzzed with the energy of newfound hope and determination. People drifted off, returning to their tasks with renewed vigor, leaving Rafe, Jax, and Myron alone in the dimly lit room. "So what now?" Jax asked, his usual bravado muted by the weight of reality. Rafe sighed, glancing around at his makeshift command center. "We keep building, keep watching, and we make sure this place is ready for whatever comes next." Myron nodded, her expression thoughtful. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but we've already done the impossible once. Who's to say we can't do it again?" Jax grinned, the infectious confidence returning. "Hell yeah, bring it on." Rafe felt the weight of their words, a promise and a challenge wrapped into one. They'd found something worth protecting, worth fighting for, and they'd be damned if they let it slip away. As they stood there, bathed in the pale glow of the flickering screens, Rafe felt a strange sense of peace. They were a team, a family of sorts, and together they could face whatever the universe threw at them. The station might have been a rusting relic, but it was theirs, and they would defend it against all comers. The aliens, the odds, the universe itself, they could all take their best shot. Rafe and his crew were ready. So they raised their glasses one final time, the silence heavy with shared intent. They would rebuild, they would prepare, and when the time came they would fight. For their future, for their freedom, and for each other. Game on, universe. They were just getting started.